This morning in our School Matters series, we are looking at why fewer men are going to college than women. Only about 4 in 10 college students are men, and that is a record low, according to the Wall Street Journal. Colleges and universities have lost 1.5 million students over the past 5 years, and men make up 71% of that decline. This gender gap is not new, but it's been widening for nearly half a century. We spoke with Marcus Pickens, who is from Inglewood, California, about why he left college.
I was a decent student in high school. I wasn't the best student, but I also didn't necessarily try my best. I faced academic struggles. So the first thing I noticed when I got into college was that I was underprepared to take college-level mathematics. I was having significant financial problems. So I ended up having to work 7 days a week. I had a realization that I'm not about to let school define who I am, you know? So I started planning a business. I was like, you know what, if my dad can do it with an 11th grade education and make his business successful enough to purchase a home, you know, then what's stopping me?
Ron Lieber is the author of The Price You Pay for College, and he joins us now. Few people know more than you about this subject. So help us understand, why have men been dropping out, in essence, for almost 50 years?
Yeah, so we have a historical issue that starts with the fact that we send 18-year-olds to college in the first place. It's not at all clear that that's the optimal time to go. Now we've got a decade or two of history of student loan debt. People have that on the brain. And then you get to a pandemic, right? And people are looking at value, right? Classes are online. You may not be able to meet your friends. And if you've got an opportunity in the marketplace where there are a lot of jobs going wanting, and they are jobs traditionally that men have taken, and they may be higher paid jobs, it sort of starts to seem like a rational decision to not go to college right away.
Yeah. Now, college may not be the best option for everyone, but what other alternatives should people consider?
Well, this is part of our challenge as a society, right? We don't necessarily value the high school to work pipeline as much as we should. Right, we don't have the right apprentice programs, we don't have the right support systems, we may not be supporting community colleges that may offer trade programs as much as we might. And so we don't value it quite in the same way, and we probably ought to do better at that.
Were you saying, Ron, that 18 is not the right age to go to college? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, many decades ago, we just decided that that's the way that it ought to be. But that was before, you know, a lot of the best science on adolescent psychology and brain development discovered that, you know, brains are not that fully formed until maybe your early 20s or your mid-20s. So we're spending all this money on college for people who may not be ready. And men, young men, don't come along as quickly as young women do on average.
I do think that's true. But what would you do when you graduate from high school? Because many people can't afford not to go to college.
Sure.
In terms of getting your career going.
Yeah, so what we're not talking about here is the sort of classic gap year as it's come to be conceived, a sort of rich person's layabout. There can be apprentice programs, there can be military service, there can be non-military national service, there can be a year of volunteer work, there can be all sorts of jobs where you can go to find your passion or just rule something out. Because if you can figure out something that you don't want to do in the world, that you don't want to study and waste money on later, you've accomplished something very important.
This really changes the college experience for kids currently at school, kids on their way to school, because if you've got 60% women on campus, 40% men, that's an imbalance, right? Are schools going to have to start favoring men, as weird as that sounds, to bring them in?
In a few schools, that's already happening. Right? And if you are an administrator at one of those schools, you have to sort of think about it, right? Because if you're trying to correct the gender imbalance, and there's a certain percentage of the population that wants to go to a 50-50 school, it's not a good look to be 60-40, right? So you may need to put your thumb on the scale for men in certain instances at some schools.
Now, you can find data that supports investing in college, which helps you with a degree and then going into the workforce. But then you can find data that shows that you can go right into the workforce out of high school. What do you think is the best option?
Well, much depends on what your interest and aptitude might be for college, right? Yeah. Not everybody wants to spend 4 years in the classroom, and there are people who are good with coding or who are good with their hands, who could find a more worthwhile and satisfying career by going straight into the workplace.
By the way, national service, military or not, at age 18 would be something this country could benefit from. A lot of people believe that. It's a conversation that comes up every now and then. Could be a solution.
You're right about that. Ron Lieber, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We will be right back.